Warren Ellis is a writer known for a lot of different things. I first became aware of him in the 1990s when Transmetropolitan may have been the first thing that I read by him, or if not that, maybe The Authority. I think he did Stormwatch and other books, superhero type books. But Transmetropolitan, I read about maybe 5 or 6 issues, and then for whatever reason I didn't read any more. Maybe I kind of drifted out of comics a little. And I decided recently, based on political events, things that I was thinking about, that now might be a good time to read through the entire series. So that is what I did. It's about 60 issues, and I read through the entire thing in maybe a week or so. And now I'll tell you what I think and how it holds up. The gist of the story is that this journalist who has been living in nature outside of the city in the science fiction future is forced through his contract with his publisher to come back to the city and just try and work for a while. And yeah, that's the gist of it. The character, though, is largely based on Hunter S. Thompson, the famous gonzo journalist, author of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. There was a movie with Johnny Depp, perhaps you saw. And basically putting that character into the cyberpunk ethos that was really popular. I mean, it's still not gone away. It's just becoming more and more our real world. If you haven't read sci-fi books like or cyberpunk books such as Neuromancer by William Gibson, which I actually have never finished, but I've read other things by William Gibson. And the gist of cyberpunk is that it's science fiction. Usually it's dystopian. The corporate state is largely looming over the world, and people live in all kinds of different lifestyles. A lot of body modification is a big theme, either through cybernetic augmentation, but not just mechanically, also, tattoos, piercings, things like that. What are the other trademarks of cyberpunk? I mean, obviously, in which the internet, it was really about the internet and connecting the world through this grid of virtual realities, that before the actual internet was really in place. So a lot of those things, you can't really write about it in the same way. After about 1990, it became a little passé, or it had to be altered, but early cyberpunk was like that. And this book came out in the 90s. I think it started in around 97, 98. And it just took that away and threw in this bitter journalist character, Spider Jerusalem, who is combating corruption, everything that he sees wrong in the world. Really, this book was a mouthpiece for Warren Ellis to just vent, and there's a lot of anger and bitterness in the book, for sure. It's really a mixed bag with this book. I enjoyed some parts of it, like the later storylines, particularly when the character of Spider Jerusalem had toned down a little and wasn't this venting, almost childish character. Every character in this book is doing tons of drugs, and they're all being addicted to their media, and it's a disgusting and ugly world that's a dark reflection of our own. And I enjoyed parts of it when he does have really thoughtful storylines, but then there's also parts where it does seem like a teenage boy fantasy, and that's what a lot of comics are in the form of superheroes. But this is maybe more intellectual teenage boy fantasy. Spider really is a superhero, but instead of superpowers, he just has the power of the pen, his word, and that is an important idea to understand, and the idea that we can fight back using our words and the way that we interact with the world and communicate. But a lot of it does come off as childish, especially when you read 5 years worth of comics in a week, as I did. It comes up too fast and there's too much repetition and too many poses where people are just smoking and trying to look cool that I just can't really relate to. But I'm glad I read it. It's just I don't foresee myself ever reading it again. The way that he depicts characters is always very extreme. People are either really good or really bad. Or even characters like Spider, who seem or try to pretend to be bad. They are at heart good, and it's a very clear divide. There's very few middling characters. I did appreciate how Ellis is able to show that the way that people want to view Spider Jerusalem as a media hero, he becomes a cartoon, literally, and merchandise is created about him and so on. And I think that is a good point, that it's very difficult to communicate as a character in the media without being turned into a lampoon. It just doesn't happen because, I mean, my opinion of why that is the medium itself. We have so much screen time, and I think the screen as it is a very limited form of media. I prefer prose comics, ultimately. That's what I'm working towards. And I do like to make these videos, but it just has a little lack of depth that you're going to get in video. It just, people love it and they think it's the real world, but it's not the real world. The art is by Darick Robertson primarily. There's a few other small projects with other artists, but he's the main artist for all 5 years, which is impressive. He has a very raw 1990s style that it works for this book. I wouldn't say it's my favorite style of art, but I did enjoy it for this book. It fits the rawness. What he does best is character faces, and that is really essential for this book. Spider Jerusalem is wearing sunglasses, or actually video glasses, through the entire series, so you don't really see a lot of his emotions and his characterization, so you have to pick the right artist for that. The other characters are drawn without glasses for the most part, so they're pretty easy to communicate. But faces is something that I think a lot of mainstream style artists, for example, Jim Lee, who's a pretty good artist, I like his art, but I wouldn't say he's a great character face artist. Like, he doesn't communicate all the nuance that you get from, like, Darick Robertson does much better than Jim Lee, although I would say Jim Lee is a better artist in terms of drawing architecture, drawing action. But yeah, there are just different emphases that you can have as an artist, and this fits this book pretty well. Also the rawness, the grittiness of, you know, showing all these alleys, these dirty areas of the city. It does work, and I think he was a good choice. I would recommend this book if you're a fan of Warren Ellis, obviously. This is one of his, I would say, primary texts, his main text. Certainly one of his most famous books of the 90s, along with The Authority and, what was the other book? Planetary. And I enjoy it. It's just, at this point in his writing, I think Warren Ellis was still working on showing nuanced characters. I haven't read much of his later books, and I probably will at some point. I haven't read any of his prose books either, so I wouldn't mind giving those a look. I hope that he has learned to differentiate his characters a little more. This is, though, an essential book for the 90s in terms of mature reader titles. I associate it with The Sandman, The Invisibles, Preacher, and this. Those are kind of the four big mature readers titles that DC put out. I think they're the most significant ones. So if you do want to check out that piece of 1990s history, Transmetropolitan, it's collected in about 11 trade paperbacks, and they're easily accessible, so give them a look.